They said my bird feeder was attracting pests, so I trained the birds to poop on one pest in particular. Her name is Linda, and she drives a white SUV. Before I tell you how I turned a few ounces of bird seed into poetic justice, do me a favor. Like this video if you've ever dealt with a petty HOA tyrant, and drop a comment below with your story. Because if you've lived in a neighborhood like mine, you know, sometimes the real pests walk on two legs. It started quietly. After 10 years in a cramped apartment, I finally moved into a small house on a peaceful street in Westwood Hills. The kind of place where neighbors wave, lawns are neat, and mailboxes are regulation height. I didn't ask for much, just a quiet corner of the world where I could work remotely, tend to my little garden, and maybe watch a few birds land on a feeder outside my kitchen window. The feeder was simple: metal pole, cedar tray, filled with black oil sunflower seeds and millet. Within days, I had cardinals, sparrows, finches, even a bold blue jay that would scream at squirrels. It became a ritual. Morning coffee, laptop open, birds fluttering a few feet away. Peace, until Linda Marston noticed. She wasn't the president of our HOA, but she might as well have been. Architectural Review Board, she told me on our first encounter, as if that meant anything. She appeared at my front door with a clipboard and a sour smile that barely masked the judgment in her eyes. "Your feeder is violating community code," she said. "Page 17, subsection 3.4. Items that attract vermin or unwanted wildlife are prohibited." I blinked. "Birds?" She adjusted her sunglasses. "Where there are birds, there's mess. And where there's mess, there's complaints. You'll need to take it down." I asked politely if there'd been any actual complaints. She didn't answer. Just said, "You're new here. I suggest you read your bylaws carefully." That night I did, all 36 pages. The rules were vague, intentionally so. Nothing specific about bird feeders. But I knew enough about people like Linda. They didn't need rules, just excuses. The next day she returned. "Still up, I see." "It's not against the rules," I said, calmly, respectfully. "Then consider this a warning." What followed was a drip campaign of HOA notices, not from the board officially, but from Linda herself, with polite passive aggression that might as well have been written in poison. Concerns have been raised about seed debris attracting rodents. Several residents noted increased bird droppings on sidewalks. I swept. I cleaned. I checked for nests, food remnants, anything remotely problematic. Nothing. Then one Saturday while I was out getting groceries, she crossed the line. A neighbor texted me a photo. Linda standing on a stepladder, unscrewing my feeder from its pole. She'd brought gloves, a trash bag, like she was handling biohazard. I got home to find the feeder gone and a note taped to my front door. "Removed in accordance with HOA environmental standards." I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry, because I was done playing nice. The next morning I watched a pair of house finches return to the empty pole and chirp in confusion. I stood at the window sipping my coffee, staring past them, to Linda's driveway across the street, where her gleaming white Lexus RX sat parked like a trophy. And then it happened. A sparrow landed on the roof of her SUV, tilted its head, and let go. The mark was small, but something in me lit up, and that's when the idea struck. I didn't say anything. Not to Linda, not to the HOA. I didn't even tell my neighbor who sent me the photo of her dismantling my feeder. That kind of pettiness doesn't need an argument. It needs patience, precision, and seeds. That evening, I bought 2 more bags of black oil sunflower seeds, some cracked corn, and a cheap plastic feeder from the hardware store. Not for my yard, for research. I walked a few blocks to a small public park just outside the HOA's jurisdiction and spent an hour watching the birds, where they fed, how they flew, how long they lingered. I started noticing patterns. Blue jays were territorial. Sparrows liked to flock. Starlings, underrated opportunists. Most importantly, birds remember. Places, people, rewards. It gave me an idea. Back home, I did something small. I started tossing a handful of sunflower seeds near the sidewalk across from Linda's house. Not directly on her property. I wasn't breaking any rules. Just on the public strip between the sidewalk and the road. A little here, a little there. Within a day, the birds followed. I never made it obvious. I'd go for morning walks with a coffee and casually scatter a few seeds along the route. I wore gloves, changed my path each time. It was all legal, all quiet, but the birds knew. I kept a journal. Each day I logged bird activity, what time they showed up, how many, where they landed. I noted when Linda washed her car, which as it turns out was almost daily. The woman treated that SUV like royalty. Her driveway had a small palm tree and a decorative bird bath that hadn't seen a real bird in months. Until now. By week 2, the neighborhood started noticing. "What's with all the birds on Linda's side?" someone muttered at the mailbox. Another neighbor chuckled. "Maybe they finally figured out where all the hot air is coming from." Linda didn't laugh. The first time she stormed across the street, she had a rag in one hand and a phone in the other. "You've been feeding birds near my property." I raised an eyebrow. "I feed birds in the public space. I enjoy nature." "They're defecating on my car." I sipped my coffee. "Maybe they're protesting HOA overreach." "You think this is funny?" "I think it's ironic." That night, another notice appeared in my mailbox. Community guidelines prohibit intentional acts that create unsanitary conditions for others. It wasn't on official HOA letterhead, just Linda's same smug font and bold red underline. But here's the thing about birds. They don't follow HOA rules. Over the next week, I fine-tuned the operation. I discovered that scattering seeds on Linda's sidewalk planter worked better than anywhere else. I timed my walks just before sunrise, placing seeds quietly before she opened her garage. By the time her car rolled out, it was under a cloud of chirping, feathered vengeance. I never said a word, just kept feeding. And it worked. By the end of the month, her pristine Lexus had become a moving monument to bird justice. She switched parking spots, she tried covering it, she installed one of those cheap plastic owls, and the birds crapped on that too. Then came the escalation. Linda was unraveling. She started patrolling her front yard with a broom, swatting at birds like they were enemy drones. I watched from my window as she muttered under her breath, inspecting the roof of her SUV for fresh splatter every few hours. She tried a tarp. The birds nested on it. She tried blasting music from her porch. The birds timed their visits between songs. Then one afternoon, I spotted a contractor's van in her driveway. Over the next 2 days, a crew installed a metal carport extension, complete with motion sensors and reflective panels. "State-of-the-art bird deterrent," she claimed, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Some of us take pride in our property," she sneered, catching my eye as I walked past. I smiled politely. "I admire your commitment." But what Linda didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd already adapted. I'd begun integrating condition placement, slowly moving seed drops along a curved path, starting from the sidewalk, up her driveway, and right beside the new structure. Birds are smart, not genius level, but smart enough. I didn't need them to understand revenge, just routine. If the seed kept coming, they kept coming. I bought a $30 feeder cam online, not for me, but to observe bird behavior near Linda's yard. I disguised it inside a broken solar light staked into the grass strip by the sidewalk. The footage it captured? Gold. Birds swarmed the area between 6:45 and 8:15 a.m., peaked again around 4 p.m. They avoided the motion sensors, but only barely. One clever mockingbird perched on the carport frame and pooped through the gap in the roofing. It landed right on the side mirror. By week 4, the SUV looked like it had been parked beneath a pigeon freeway. But the real masterpiece happened one Saturday morning. Linda's daughter was visiting, tall, impatient, dressed in athleisure and judgment. I watched them argue beside the car, Linda gesturing wildly, pointing to the white-streaked hood like it was a crime scene. And that's when I witnessed something incredible. A flock of starlings, maybe 20 strong, swooped low over the SUV and unloaded midair. It was synchronized, like they'd trained for it. Her daughter screamed. Linda turned beet red, flapping her arms like a scarecrow having a breakdown. It was glorious. Later that day, HOA members received an urgent community update via email. It was from Linda, naturally. She was proposing a ban on bird feeders and open wildlife attractants within a 300-foot radius of residential vehicles. I replied with a single sentence, Please cite the specific regulation that supports this proposed measure. No response. That night, I poured a little extra cracked corn near her lawn ornaments. Just a sprinkle. Just enough. Because this wasn't about birds anymore. This was about balance. By now, the neighborhood had taken notice. Not just of the birds, but of the quiet war between Linda and, well, nature. Neighbors walked slower past her house. A few even took photos. Someone posted a side-by-side comparison of her SUV from 2 months apart in the local community Facebook group, captioned, "From pearl white to pigeon gray." The comments were merciless. "Looks like someone pissed off a flock." "New HOA regulation. Birds need permits to fly." "She should try being nicer. Birds are good judges of character." Linda shut down the comment thread within the hour, but the damage was done. Her image, the polished enforcer of community standards, had cracked. And it wasn't just about the car anymore. A few brave souls began speaking up. An elderly couple down the block shared how Linda once fined them for having a too colorful doormat. Another neighbor admitted she'd removed their wind chimes for being audibly disruptive. Her reputation was shifting from concerned citizen to full-blown control freak, and people were fed up. Then came the letter, a formal notice from the HOA addressed to all residents, a proposed amendment banning wildlife feeders, citing unsanitary conditions and vehicular damage. It was written in her voice, even if her name wasn't on it. But this time, it wasn't just me who pushed back. Amanda, a sharp-tongued real estate agent who lived 2 houses down, replied to the HOA thread, "Funny, I don't recall bird poop being listed as grounds for legislative change in our bylaws." Another neighbor chimed in, "Is the board basing policy on one person's vendetta?" Suddenly, what had started as a private feud became a very public referendum on Linda's tactics. I didn't gloat, not publicly, but inside I felt vindicated. The birds kept doing what birds do. My hand was invisible, my actions legal, my conscience clean. All I'd ever wanted was peace and the freedom to enjoy my own yard. But Linda had made that impossible, so I'd simply redirected the natural consequences of her behavior back where they belonged. Still, I didn't expect what came next. HOA announced a community meeting to vote on the new policy. Attendance was mandatory for homeowners. Linda came prepared, clipboard in hand, charts printed. She even brought a poster board with photos of her vandalized car, each one labeled by date. "This is the result of unchecked wildlife attraction," she said, voice tight. "This isn't about me. It's about all of us." Someone coughed. A neighbor whispered, "Sure it isn't." I stayed silent until my name was mentioned. "We believe one particular resident has intentionally escalated this issue," Linda continued. "And if we allow this kind of behavior to go unpunished, what's next? Coyotes? Raccoons? Disease?" That's when I stood. "May I respond?" All eyes turned. I stepped forward, holding a printed packet of the community guidelines, the same ones Linda had used against me. "There is no policy prohibiting bird feeders, nor is there any clause giving the HOA the authority to remove property from someone's yard without consent." I paused. "And if this is about mess, I'd like to point out that dog waste has caused more sidewalk complaints than birds ever have. Should we ban dogs next?" A few chuckles. Linda's face tightened. "And finally," I added, "if a resident's personal disputes are driving board policy, then maybe we need to look at who's setting the agenda." Silence, then Amanda stood up beside me. "I motion to table this vote until we investigate potential abuse of authority." Another voice. "Seconded." The meeting dissolved into arguments and procedural chaos. But one thing was clear. Linda no longer controlled the narrative. And the birds? They weren't going anywhere. The vote never happened. Instead, the HOA board scheduled an internal review of Linda's conduct. Anonymously, but not really, several neighbors submitted statements describing her intimidation tactics, selective enforcement of rules, and the mysterious disappearance of decorations and yard fixtures that didn't fit the community aesthetic. One even attached security footage of Linda measuring a mailbox with a tape measure at midnight. Her grip on the neighborhood was slipping. A week later, a printed flyer appeared in every mailbox. Linda Marston stepping down from her position on the Architectural Review Board due to personal reasons. No signature, no goodbye, but she didn't disappear. Not entirely. Her white SUV still sat in the driveway, still polished, still pristine, at least every morning, after what I assumed were late-night cleaning rituals. But by noon the stains returned like clockwork. The birds had formed a habit now. Even without the seed placements, they favored her driveway. It was as if they'd taken it personally. One morning I opened my door and found Linda standing on the sidewalk in front of my house. She wasn't holding a clipboard, no sunglasses, no false smile, just a look of quiet exhaustion. "I know what you did," she said. I didn't answer. She looked past me, toward the bird feeder I'd reinstalled 2 days earlier. This time in plain sight, perched proudly in the corner of my front yard, within every guideline. "I thought you people were the problem," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Turns out, maybe I was." I didn't reply with sarcasm. I didn't gloat. Instead, I nodded. "You could put one up too." She almost laughed. "They'd never come for me." And then she walked away. Linda's car was eventually moved to the garage. The driveway stayed quiet. The birds scattered. Life, unbelievably, moved on. The neighborhood relaxed. People smiled more. Amanda organized a spring garden walk. A retired teacher started a community newsletter. Someone added a little free library at the edge of the park. And every morning I still sit at my window with coffee in hand, watching sparrows flutter down for breakfast. Not as weapons, not as messengers of revenge, just birds, doing what they do. But sometimes, when I see a certain white SUV roll down the street, I can't help but smile. Because in a world full of noise, you don't always need to shout to be heard. Sometimes all it takes is a little seed.